My name is Michael Thompson. I'm 34 years old, living in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, Illinois. My younger brother, Ethan, is 29. We had a sister, too, Emily, who's 31, married, and lives in Seattle with her husband and two kids. Dad was the rock of our family. He built our home from the ground up, a 2,500 square foot, two-story house on a half-acre lot in an old neighborhood. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, full of memories from backyard barbecues, holiday dinners, and late night talks on the porch. Dad always said, a house isn't just walls and a roof, it's our roots, our history, the place where we became who we are. He poured 40 years of hard work into it, overtime at the factory, savings from every paycheck. He swore he'd never sell it. But Ethan was different. He was the charismatic one, the life of the party. But underneath it all, he was reckless. And that recklessness exploded on the day we buried Dad. Flashback. Our childhood. 20 to 25 years ago. Soft, nostalgic music fades in. Sounds of kids playing basketball in the driveway, summer cicadas. We grew up in that house. Dad was a factory supervisor, honest, hardworking, never rich, but always fair. Mom passed away when I was 15 from breast cancer. After that, Dad raised us alone. He taught us the basics. Work hard, stay honest, protect your family. I was the steady one. Studied engineering, landed a solid job at a tech firm, saved every dollar. Emily was the bright one, became a high school teacher, married young to a software engineer. Ethan? He was the baby, a little spoiled. Don't worry, kid, Dad's got it, Dad used to say. Ethan dropped out of community college after 2 years. Omar saying business is where it's at. He started small, flipping sneakers online, then sports betting during NFL games. Just for fun, bro, he'd tell me. One evening when he was 20, Michael, Ethan cut the betting crap, Dad will find out. Ethan, chill, Mike. I won $2,000 last week, easy cash. Dad overheard. He didn't shout, he just sat Ethan down. Dad, son, gambling is a sickness. It destroys everything it touches. Promise me you'll quit. Ethan, okay, Dad, I promise. Promises are easy to break. Ethan's downward spiral, 5 to 3 years ago. By 24, Ethan was hooked. Online sports books, casino apps, underground poker nights in downtown bars. He'd disappear for days, come back broke, asking for just a little help. Dad gave him chances. Once $10,000 for a startup, a drop shipping store that never launched. Oh, Ethan lost it all on a lock bet during March Madness. Emily flew in from Seattle. Emily, Ethan, you're killing Dad slowly. Get help before it's too late. Ethan, sis, stay out of it. Your husband's got a great salary. I have to make my own way. I tried tough love. Michael, Ethan, move out if you won't change, but don't drag us all down. Ethan, you're just jealous because Dad always liked me more. Dad got sick. Lung cancer, stage 3. Chemo wiped out our savings. I sold my truck. Emily sent money from her paycheck. Ethan, he promised to pitch in, but vanished more often. One night in the hospital, Dad, weak on oxygen. Michael, I updated the will. The house goes to you. Ethan, he'll destroy it. Protect it, son. I was floored. Dad had always been fair, but he knew. I nodded, fighting tears. Day. The final months, Dad's battle. The last 2 years were brutal. Endless hospital runs, bills stacking up. Ethan showed up now and then, reeking of cigarettes and excuses. One fight, Michael. Where were you last night? Dad asked for you. Ethan, out networking, business stuff. Michael, bullshit. Your network is bookies. How much do you owe now? Ethan, and nothing. Stop acting like my dad. He owed hundreds of thousands, maybe over $1 million by the end. Loan sharks called the landline, leaving threats. Dad heard one once and had a panic attack. Emily, Mike, if Ethan tries to touch the house, I'll never forgive him. It's Dad's legacy. The funeral day. The bombshell. Rain falling softly, somber organ music, mourners in black umbrellas. Dad passed at sunrise. We handled the rituals. Viewing, funeral mass at St. Mary's, a day burial in the family plot. The cemetery was packed, relatives, old co-workers, neighbors, back at the house for the reception. Coffee, sandwiches, people sharing dad stories. He was one of the good ones. Always fixed everyone's car for free. Ethan had been silent all day, eyes bloodshot, not just grief. Around 4 p.m., with the living room full, he grabbed the microphone from the priest who'd used it for the blessing. Ethan, voice shaking, amplified. Thanks everyone for coming. Dad's gone, but life doesn't stop. I I have an announcement. The room went dead quiet. Ethan. We're selling the family home to cover my debts. Gasps. Whispers turned to murmurs. Ethan, I owe a ton. Gambling losses, bad investments, close to $1.5 million. If I don't pay up, these people will come after me, after all of us. This is what Dad would want. He wanted us safe, together. Uncle Tom. Ethan, what debts? How much? Ethan. Doesn't matter now. Business went south. Please, understand. I stood, frozen. Emily, near the back, turned white. She whispered, No way. I stepped forward. Michael, voice rising. Ethan, stop. This is Dad's funeral, not your confession booth. Ethan, louder. Mike will figure it out. He's got the job, the savings. Emily's married. Sell the house, clear the debts, split what's left. Fair, right? Cousin Lisa. This is insane. On the day we bury his father? Neighbor. Poor kid must be in deep trouble. Emily exploded. Ethan, this house is our childhood. Dad's blood, sweat and tears. You can't do this. Ethan. Em, you don't even live here anymore. Your husband makes bank. Think about me for once. I pulled him into the garage. Michael. What the hell is wrong with you? Dad's barely in the ground. Ethan, tears streaming, desperate. Bro, they'll kill me. Bookies, sharks, I borrowed big for opportunities. Selling is the only fix. Michael. Dad left the house to me in the will. You get nothing. Ethan, stunned. You're lying. We're supposed to be equal. He shoved past me and stormed back inside, ranting to anyone who listened. Aftermath. That night and the next day. Guests trickled out by dusk, buzzing about Ethan's disgrace. Ethan disappeared, grabbed his duffel, phone off. Next morning, the lawyer arrived. Will reading in the living room, Dad's favorite recliner still there. Lawyer, to Michael, the house and my retirement savings, $150,000. Aran to Emily, the vacation cabin up north, worth $200,000. To Ethan, $50,000 cash, conditional on completing rehab and staying clean for a year. Ethan burst in later, furious. Ethan, this is bullshit. I'm his son too. Michael, you announced selling it at the funeral. Everyone knows about your addiction now. Dad protected us. Ethan begged, give me my share. I'll pay everyone off, turn my life around. Michael, no, but I'll help if you go to rehab. For real this time. The resolution. Intervention and healing. I didn't sell. Rented the house to a nice family. Rent covers taxes, upkeep, Emily's kids' college fund, Dad's headstone maintenance. With Emily and close relatives, we quietly handled some creditors, paid off smaller debts anonymously, warned the big ones. Come near him. Nay, we go to the authorities. Family intervention. We got Ethan into a 90-day inpatient rehab in Minnesota. His journey, detailed glimpses. Week 1, rage, denial. I don't belong here. Month 1, withdrawals, confessing losses, how a big win spiraled into chasing highs. Month 2, regret. Dad died knowing what I was doing. Discharge, sober, humble. Landed a job at an auto parts warehouse. He came home changed. Ethan. Mike, forgive me, I was lost. Michael. Forgiven. But the house stays, it's Dad's. Emily came around too. We all gather there now. Holidays, birthdays, memories alive. Soft acoustic guitar fades in slowly. Think something like the sound of The Night We Met by Lord Huron. But gentler. Rain has stopped. Or late afternoon sunlight filters through the living room curtains of the old house. Gambling almost stole Ethan's future. Almost. But almost is not the same as actually. There's a difference between a house burning down and a house catching fire, but being saved by buckets passed hand to hand in the middle of the night. The structure stands. blackened in places, smoke-stained, smelling faintly of char for years afterward, but it still stands. You can still walk through the front door. You can still sit on the porch steps where you used to wait for the school bus. The foundation never moved. Our house is like that now. It still smells like Dad's coffee, even though no one has brewed Folgers in that kitchen for over 2 years. Under the third staircase, still creaks exactly the way it did when we were kids, racing each other to the bathroom in the morning. The scratch on the hallway wall from when Ethan, age 8, tried to park his toy truck by slamming it full speed into the drywall, that scratch is still there. I never painted over it. None of us did. Some marks you keep. After the funeral, after the will reading, after Ethan disappeared for 3 days and came back looking like he hadn't slept or eaten, we didn't sell the house. I couldn't. Emily couldn't. And deep down, even though he screamed otherwise at first, Ethan didn't really want us to either. He just didn't know how else to survive. That's the cruelest part of addiction. It makes you believe the only way out is through the thing you love most. Ethan truly believed, that selling Dad's house was the only path left. He had convinced himself that if he could just liquidate the biggest, most visible asset, the sharks would back off, the phone would stop ringing at 3 a.m., the knots in his stomach would finally loosen. He was wrong. Debts like that don't disappear when you hand over a check. They multiply. They send new collectors. They whisper new threats. They turn friends into enemies and family into collateral. Ethan learned that the hard way, not from me lecturing him, not from Emily crying on speakerphone from Seattle, but from sitting in a folding chair in a church basement in St. Paul, listening to strangers describe the exact same lie he had told himself for 7 years. I'll stop when I win big one more time. I just need enough to get square. Once the pressure's off, I'll be normal again. He heard those sentences so many times they stopped sounding like other people's stories and started sounding like recordings of his own voice. Rehab wasn't magic. It wasn't a 90-day eraser. The first week, he called me collect from the payphone outside the facility. They still had one. And begged to come home. Mike, I can't do this. They're making me talk about Mom, about Dad, about the night I stole her wedding ring to pawn it. I can't. I didn't yell. I just said quietly, "You already did those things, Ethan. Talking won't make them worse, but staying quiet might." He hung up. 2 days later, he called again. This time, he was crying so hard the words barely came out. I told my group leader I wished Dad was still alive so I could apologize. Then I remembered he died knowing exactly what I was, and that hurt worse than anything they've said here. I let him cry. For almost 4 minutes, I said nothing. Just listened to my little brother sob 450 miles away. When he finally quieted, I told him, "Daddy didn't die hating you. He died scared for you. There's a difference. Come home when you're ready to stop running from that fear." He stayed. Month 2. He started writing letters. Not emails, actual pen-on-paper letters, the way Dad used to write us when he was on long trucking runs before the factory promoted him. Ethan's handwriting was shaky at first, like a kid learning cursive again. One letter arrived in early November. "Mike, they made us do a gratitude list today. I hated it." Everyone wrote normal stuff. Family, health, sobriety. I couldn't think of anything. Then the counselor asked, "What about the house? You still have a place to go back to? Most people here don't." I started crying in the middle of group. Not quiet crying, loud, ugly crying. Because she was right, you and Em could have sold it. You could have washed your hands of me. Instead, you kept the keys in the same kitchen drawer Dad always kept them in. Third slot from the left, under the loose recipe cards. I don't deserve that key. But knowing it's still there, it's the only thing keeping me from walking out the front gate tonight. Tell Em I'm sorry for what I said at the funeral. Tell her I was trying to hurt her so she'd hate me and leave me alone to self-destruct in peace. I don't want peace anymore. I want to come home and sit on that porch and drink bad coffee and not feel like I'm about to throw up every second. I'm trying, Mike. For the first time maybe ever, I'm really trying. I read that letter 3 times before I could speak. Then I called Emily and read it to her over FaceTime. She cried the way only big sisters cry when their baby brother finally admits he wants to live. We framed that letter. It's on the mantel now, next to Dad's Navy photo and the little ceramic angel Mom used to put out at Christmas. Month 3. Ethan got a weekend pass. He didn't ask to come to Chicago. He asked if he could go to the cabin up north, the one Dad left to Emily in the will. She said yes immediately. I drove him up there myself. 4 hours of mostly silence. No, just the hum of tires on I-94 and the occasional classic rock station fading in and out. When we pulled into the gravel driveway, snow was falling in big, lazy flakes. The cabin looked exactly like it always had. Cedar siding, green metal roof, smoke already curling from the chimney because Emily had arrived the day before with her husband Mark and the kids. Ethan got out of the car and just stood there staring. Emily came out on the porch in socks, arms crossed against the cold. "You're taller than I remembered," she said. He laughed, a small surprised sound. "I've been eating 3 meals a day for the first time since high school." She walked down the steps and hugged him so hard I thought she might crack ribs. Then she whispered something in his ear I couldn't hear. He nodded, started crying again. Sira, that weekend we didn't talk about gambling once. We made s'mores in the fireplace even though it was only November. We played Uno with the kids until 1 a.m. Ethan lost every hand and didn't get mad once. He let my 6-year-old niece draw on his arm with washable markers. A terrible dragon with 17 eyes. He wore the Sharpie tattoo proudly for 3 days. On Sunday morning, while everyone was still asleep, I found him on the dock, staring at the frozen lake. I sat next to him without asking. After a long time, he said, "I used to think if I could just get enough money, I'd feel safe. Turns out safety isn't a number in a bank account. It's this." He waved his hand at the cabin, the snow, the quiet. "It's knowing there's still a place that'll take me back even after everything." I put my arm around his shoulder the way Dad used to do when we were teenagers. "Always will be," I told him. He came home for Christmas that year. Not the big dramatic return with banners and tears, just a quiet arrival on December 23rd, carrying one duffel bag and a poinsettia he bought at a gas station because they didn't have real flowers. Emily flew in with the kids. We cooked Dad's chili recipe, the one with the secret spoonful of cocoa powder. Ethan chopped onions without complaining. When the timer went off and we sat around the dining table, the same table where we used to fight over the last drumstick, no one mentioned the funeral. No one mentioned deaths. We just ate, laughed at the kids, throwing marshmallows at each other, listened to Dad's old Johnny Cash vinyl because Ethan asked if we still had it. After dinner, he went out to the garage and came back with Dad's toolbox. The red metal one that always smelled faintly of motor oil. "I want to fix the porch railing," he said. "It's been loose since I was 15 and tried to do a kickflip on my skateboard." I handed him the drill without a word. He worked on it for 3 hours in the cold. When he finished, the railing was solid again. He tested it with his full weight. Didn't budge. Emily took a picture. I pretended not to notice her wiping her eyes. That was 2 years ago. Today, Ethan lives in a small 1-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from the house. He works at a warehouse that supplies auto parts. Not glamorous, but steady. He clocks in at 7 a.m., clocks out at 3:30 p.m., comes home, makes dinner, goes to a meeting 3 nights a week. He still slips sometimes. Last spring he had a bad week. Old triggers, old voices. He didn't bet, but he wanted to. Badly. He called me at 2 a.m. "Mike, I'm sitting in my car outside the casino. I haven't gone in, but I drove here." I got dressed, drove to pick him up. We sat in the parking lot until sunrise. He talked. I listened. When the sky turned pink, he said, "Take me home." I did. Not my home. Our home. We sat on the porch steps until the coffee was ready. He drank 2 cups black the way Dad used to. "I'm proud of you," I told him. He laughed, a short, broken sound. "For not going inside?" "No, for calling me instead." He's been clean since. The house is still mine, legally anyway, but it doesn't feel like mine, Beb. It feels like ours. Emily comes every summer with the kids. They sleep in their old bedrooms. Ethan mows the lawn when he visits. I trim the hedges Dad planted 30 years ago. Sometimes, late at night when everyone's asleep, I walk through the rooms and remember. The corner where Mom used to read us stories. The kitchen table where Dad taught Ethan how to tie a tie for his first school dance. He still can't do a Windsor knot properly. The basement where we built blanket forts during thunderstorms. Gambling tried to take all of that. It failed. Not because we're stronger than addiction, we're not. Addiction is a monster with infinite patience. It failed because roots are stubborn. They grow sideways under concrete, crack foundations, find water in places that should be bone dry. They don't ask permission. They just keep growing. Dad's words were simple. Guard your roots. I thought he meant the house. Now I know he meant something bigger. He meant the messy, painful, beautiful thing we call family. The thing that stays even when you scream at it to leave. The thing that opens the door at 2 a.m. when you've driven to a casino and call the only person who still answers. The thing that forgives, not because it's easy, but because letting go would hurt more. Ethan works hard now. He visits often. He laughs louder than he used to. He still can't cook anything except scrambled eggs, but he tries. We heal one day at a time. Some days are good. Porch coffee, Cardinals game on the radio, kids running through the sprinklers. Some days are hard. Anniversaries, old cravings, the empty recliner that still smells faintly of dad's aftershave. But every day, we choose each other again. And that choice matters more than any bank balance ever could. The house stands strong, a little worn, a little scarred, but standing, a reminder that some things, the best things, are worth protecting more than money. Dad was right. Guard your roots. They'll carry you through storms you never thought you'd survive. Don't let debts destroy your legacy. Don't let shame convince you there's no way back. There is, always. Even if the road is long and crooked and hurts like hell. There is a way back, and when you finally step onto that porch again, shaky, ashamed, exhausted, the light will still be on. Because family left it burning for you. Music swells gently, then fades to silence.
If you like this story, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and press the bell icon so that every new upcoming video can reach you.